Good morning, everyone. Welcome from Helsinki, Finland. I hope you're having a lovely day. My name is Balduyck. I work for the European Chemicals Agency, and today I will present you an exciting new project called the SCIP database, which will bring hopefully some improvements to the circular economy in Europe and beyond. Before going into the details of this project, I will present you a bit the background of our agency and the work that we are doing. I am very glad to be with you here today via this video connection. I am sorry not to be able to be with you today, but I hope that this presentation will be interesting for you in any case. So here we go. The European Chemicals Agency has been established in 2007. It employs 650 people, experts from around the European Union member states, and it mainly employs scientific experts in the field of chemicals management. We are managing the core chemicals regulations of the European Union, the main one being the REACH regulation, which you sure have heard of. But besides that main regulation, we also deal with the CLP regulation, the biocides regulation, the PIC and POP regulation, the occupational exposure limits, and the Waste Framework Directive, which is the topic of today's presentation. So before I go into the details of this new database, I will give you a bit of background of where this new obligation is coming from. So first of all, it dates back to the circular economy package which the European Commission has adopted in 2015 and which has as a main aim to improve the recycling rates in Europe, but also to improve the uptake of secondary raw materials. And in order to do so, they need to be free from hazardous chemicals. The database that I'll be talking about today has a big role to play in that. So let's go and have a look at this database project. First of all, a bit of legal text. I will try to avoid to refer too much to the law, but here it's unavoidable. Just to remind you that the obligation that this database is bringing with it is set in the Waste Framework Directive, which has been adopted in 2018, and two articles of this directive are bringing a rather big effect on industry as a whole and set up the database. So any word in these definitions that are on the screen here are of very large importance. So let me quickly take you through that. So the directive states that any supplier of an article, as defined in REACH, will have to provide information to the Chemicals Agency as of the 5th of January 2021 when such article contains a substance of very high concern. We'll come back to all these elements in a minute. Secondly, the directive says that the European Chemicals Agency, which I'll refer to as ECHA from now onwards, has to set up a database that contains this information and make this information available to waste operators and to consumers. So what does this mean? The substances of very high concern that we are talking about here have been defined in the REACH regulation, and it's a list of candidate list substances, as we call them, which is a list of about 200 substances which are of concern. These are hazardous substances for which the goal has been established that in the EU market they should be phased out in the longer term. When such articles are used in articles, complex objects or products above a certain weight, the threshold being 0.1 weight by weight, then the obligation kicks in that information has to be supplied throughout the supply chain on these substances. So this is an existing legal duty from the REACH regulation since 2007, that suppliers throughout the supply chain have to inform each other when they are using these substances of very high concern. This is not a new obligation, but the novelty here comes from the fact that this information, which should already be flowing throughout the supply chain, now also has to be provided to the European Chemicals Agency, which will then make it available to waste operators and to consumers. Coming back to some of the definitions. So what is exactly an article? An article is an object which during production is given a special shape, surface or design which determines its function to a greater degree than does its chemical composition. This is a very legal definition, and there's often some discussion around which articles are exactly in the scope of this definition. But to give you a very simple example, for instance, a screw is an article. Paint is a mixture, which is something different. However, the container of the paint is an article again. So it is a very complex issue, but there have been clear guidance from the agency that can be followed, and some of these issues have been clarified also in court, so the definition should be rather clear from now onwards. These articles, so the screw for instance, can be incorporated in complex objects. Complex objects are a combination of several articles. So when you take the examples on the screen here, you could have pencil sharpener, which is composed of 3 articles. The pencil sharpener in itself is a complex object, in regular life often referred to as a product. And these products can be very simple, such as a pencil sharpener, or very complex, such as automobiles or airplanes. These articles can thus be 3 in one complex object, such as in the pencil sharpener example, or can be in the thousands when we talk about cars or airplanes. It's important to note, however, that the European Court has determined that articles always remain articles even when they are incorporated into complex objects. This is important as it means that the reporting obligations concern also the article level, so every article incorporated into the complex object. And one cannot report only at the product level or complex object level. So you cannot report only on which substance of concern is contained into the car. It needs to be reported on every article in the car. So when we switch to the SCIP database and the purpose of it, I will go in a bit more detail now. The SCIP database is meant to reduce the content of hazardous substances in articles in products, as well as in recycled materials. The main objective of the database remains the substitution of these substances of very high concern. These are substances that are hazardous and should only be used in very controlled conditions and be phased out where possible. The second objective will be that if substitution is not possible, then at least we should contribute to a more circular economy and improve the treatment of the waste of such articles. Waste operators should have more knowledge about what hazardous substances are contained in the waste that they are receiving. So when they recycle, they can avoid recycling hazardous substances. Finally, also the database will bring more information to authorities. It will give them information on where hazardous substances are used in which products and in which articles. The database has a few milestones predefined in the legal text. So first of all, the Waste Framing Directive entered into force on July 2018. It set forth a first obligation for the European Chemicals Agency to develop such a database by the 5th of January 2020, which is very near by now. And the legal obligation for companies to submit information to the database is 1 year later, by the 5th of January 2021. So in short, the task of the agency is to establish such a database and to enable companies to submit information to it. The obligation of industry is to provide the information they have on the hazardous substances in their articles to the agency. So when you are a non-European company, why should you be concerned? One reason is that you are part of supply chains which are global and go beyond borders, and your European partners may have such obligations to provide information to the European Chemicals Agency. So they may be requesting for information from you. A second reason may be that you are an importer yourself. You are importing such articles containing substances of concern into the European market. At that point, the obligation becomes applicable to you directly as well. The information that you will have to provide is defined in the legal text, and it contains, for instance, any information to identify the article, to describe the concentration range of the substance of concern in the article, the location of such substance, and then also sufficient information to allow the user safe use of such article. And this extends to the waste stage. So it means that you may also have to provide information on how to best dismantle such articles. So going further into these information requirements, the SCIP database will ensure that sufficient information is available about the presence of such hazardous substances in articles and that it's communicated throughout the supply chain. So first of all, the article which contains such hazardous substance has to be identified. It has to be described in the information sent to the European Chemicals Agency. Then the substance of concern has to be described, and it has to be described where in the article such substance is located. And finally, as I said, the safe use instructions have to be described. So these are the three main elements of the information requirements that ECHA will put forward for the database to function. The European Chemicals Agency has worked on developing the specifications of the database in the last year in consultation with the industry partners, with other stakeholders, with member states of the European Union, and has now finalized these information requirements, and they will be published on the ECHA website during the month of September. So watch our website for more information. I will come back to that in a minute. So coming back to the issue of who is concerned by this obligation, is it every company, or are we talking about some companies in the supply chain? Let's look at that question right now. First of all, the legal text refers to any supplier of such articles. So by definition, it concerns every supplier in the supply chain. Of course, there is a threshold that needs to be taken into account, so only above a certain weight in the article the duty applies. So just as a reminder, the majority of articles or products on the market do not contain such hazardous substances. And even if they do, they're often below the threshold. But however, when they are reaching the threshold, the information duty kicks in. So it applies to any supplier, which means manufacturers located in the European Union, as well as importers of such articles. So if you import articles that contain such substance of concern above the threshold, the duty applies to you as well. The duty also extends to any following supplier in the supply chain, including assemblers, distributors, etc. There is one exception to that rule, that any retailer which supplies only to consumers is excluded from the scope. The supply to consumers is not in the legal obligation that is in front of us here today. And as a reminder, the legal duty will kick in from the 5th of January 2021. So this is in 1.5 years, so the time will come soon that European companies as well as importers will have to start preparing for this work. So how will this information flow to the database? So first of all, as a company supplying such articles, you will have different options to supply information to the European Chemicals Agency. There will be a format made available throughout the autumn of this year, the technical format, which will allow you to see and adapt your existing supply chain IT tools, your tracking tools, to comply with the information requirements of the agency. So the format will be made available, and then you have 3 options to submit the information, either by submitting manual upload of such a file, by doing the preparation of such a file online via our online submission tools, or to establish a connection via system-to-system submission. Especially the latter possibility will be very interesting for you if you want to avoid manual work. We will make available a system-to-system solution where you can submit information directly from your IT tracking tools if you establish the connection with our database through an API, for instance. Then the ECHA database will contain all that information. It will arrange it, it will make it visible for yourselves, but also for the waste operators and the consumers. So ECHA considers that the information submitted to it will be public. It will make it available through a solution online via its website, and waste operators, the main target audience for this information, will be able to view this information via the ECHA website. Also, consumers will be able to do so. So when we make this information available, of course, we will make sure that we do not disclose any trade secrets or confidential business information. So you can be assured that ECHA will not make available any information which may reveal supply chain links or who is supplying which article to whom. So this information will not be made available. However, the information that is published will also be under the responsibility of the submitter. So any question about the accuracy of the data remains with the submitting party. But as said, the information is public. ECHA will strive to only request information that can be considered public and will not reveal any confidential business information. So in terms of the project of setting up the ECHA database, the SCIP database as we now call it, here is a short state of play. So the IT project is well underway to develop such a database, and we are aiming for a release in the first months of 2020. So the database will be available for you to test, to see which information is requested and to see how such information can be collected and submitted to the agency. We will, however, only request you to do so from 1 year later onwards, the 5th of January 2021, as only then the legal obligation will kick in. So we will have a 1 year window where we can still improve the tools. You have the opportunity to collect information that is missing or to adapt any IT systems you may have. So in terms of the information requirements, the questions that ECHA will be asking, the information it will be seeking, as I said, this information has been or will be published during the first weeks of September, and therefore you can consult the ECHA website and find this information there. So you have all the information that we will be requesting. Then, as I said also before, we will make the technical format available for you to see how this will work in terms of IT submission. And then in terms of engagement with industry and with the users of the database, we will establish during the autumn also a test group to make sure that the solution works and that it's practical and that it can be implemented by all the duty holders. We have throughout the last year been in very close consultation with the European industry, but also with those from outside, to hear their thoughts, to hear their expectations and concerns, and to try to adapt to come with a workable solution that is practical and implementable. So we will continue that open and transparent discussion with the stakeholders. A first opportunity to do so will be in November, when we will be organizing a workshop for the stakeholder community, especially for industry, and where we will be talking about how this information can be submitted to ECHA, how the IT tool will look like. We may have some mock-ups of the tool to show you already. So this workshop is under preparation. We will confirm the exact dates later. So I would invite you to follow the ECHA website to get any information. There will be some news about the database coming out soon. So all the information that I provided you today will be there, and with more detail. We will provide a question and answer section on the website. So if you have any doubts about whether your company is concerned about this new obligation, I do invite you to find out more and to go to the ECHA website. So to conclude on my presentation, I would like to repeat some of the key messages, and if you remember anything of this presentation, to at least take these messages home with you. First of all, the substances of very high concern, or SVHCs as they are abbreviated, are substances of a certain hazard, and the main aim is that they are replaced by safer alternatives. So this remains the ultimate goal of the REACH regulation, combined also with this new obligation stemming from the Waste Framework Directive. Where substitution of such hazardous substances is not yet possible, then the supply chain transparency is very important. Every actor in the chain needs to be transparent about the use of such hazardous substances towards their customers as well as to consumers. So the database will bring even further transparency about such information. It will allow consumers to make informed choices when purchasing products or disposing or dismantling products. And it will also close the information gap that currently exists for waste operators. Currently, waste operators do not get sufficient information about the presence of hazardous chemicals in the waste that they are receiving. So the waste operators often recycle materials that may contain hazardous chemicals, which is to be improved. Only then we can come to a true circular economy. So about the database itself, the main message is that we are working on the IT development. We will have a prototype version of the database available from the first months of 2020 onwards. It will be available for you for testing, for getting used to the tool, to the information requirement, to prepare. And then from the 5th of January 2021, the legal obligation will kick in that information has to be provided to the European Chemicals Agency via that database. So I thank you very much. I hope you have an interesting conference today. And of course, we are very happy to come back to you if you have specific questions. You can submit them via the functional mailbox that is displayed on these final slides, wfd@echa.europa.eu, or to contact the agency directly via its website. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a lovely day.